Hello, welcome to the Bearded Tits podcast, hosted by me, Jack Perks. Professionally, I'm a wildlife cameraman, but I dabble in podcasting, and each Tuesday we release an episode as I have a chat with scientists, artists, filmmakers, and passionate people all about nature in a light-hearted and certainly not serious way. Hello and welcome to the Bearded Tits podcast. I'm your host, Jack Perks. Now in today's episode, I haven't got a guest on, but I am going to be talking about a fish that is one of my favourite species, and that is the ruff. They're kind of like a small perch, if you know what a perch is. They're amazing. I absolutely love them. We're going to be talking about the biology of the ruff, some of the interesting facts and figures about them, where you find them. They're a British species, so chances are you've walked by a river and there'll be a ruff or two swimming below. Now, just to pre-warn you, I've gotten back from Australia recently, so I'm still a little bit knackered. I went to Melbourne. Absolutely fucking incredible. I loved it. I loved Australia. The journey was a bit of a ball ache. I have got an upcoming episode on platypus, and I talked to a platypus expert, so that will be coming out at some point. Amazing trip. And I've also just gotten back from a stag do. So I'm going to try not to fall asleep during this episode. I'll try and make it long enough to make it worthwhile, but we'll see how we go. Now, as always, if you can support this podcast, the best way to do that is via buymeacoffee.com. Essentially, I do this podcast for nothing. The only way that I make money is via you, the listener. So if you can donate, I'm only asking for the price of a coffee or a pint, about a £5. You can donate more if you want. But if you can do that, it helps me keep this podcast independent. It means that I don't have to be beholden to advertisers, and I can say and do more or less whatever the fuck I want. So that's brilliant if you can do that. And if you do, I will read out your messages. So here's a few that I've been meaning to get around to. So Miss Pamela McPherson discovered this interesting, informative podcast when I moved from North Uist to the Cairngorms in 2023. I'm 77 and natural history never fails to amaze and delight me. Thank you. Thank you, Pamela. That's very kind of you. You got me a coffee. So Laura bought me 3 coffees, you absolute legend. And she's put, thanks for making the podcast, smiley face. And Charlotte, she's asked me not to read it all out, but she's also left me a message and donated some dollar to that as well. So thank you so much for that, Charlotte, as well. So yeah, if you want to write a message, you can do that, and I'll read it out in an upcoming episode. The podcast is winding down. We've only got 1 or 2 more episodes left, and then there'll be a bit of a break, and then we'll be back for what is going to be the final season of the podcast. So sorry to disappoint people, but there will be 1 more season, and then I'm going to be hanging up my headphones after that. I've really enjoyed doing the podcast. I'll get into it in a later episode why I'm stopping it. I have loved doing it, but I think all things have to end eventually. So 1 more season will be coming out next year, and then that'll be it. On a separate note, I will get to the ruff eventually, don't worry. I am going to be at Bird Fair this year, and I will be doing a live podcast at Bird Fair, which I believe is July... Oh shit, let me have a look at my calendar. July the 12th, I think, or the 11th, one of the others. So if you're going to Bird Fair this year and you fancy seeing me live, I'm not sure how that's going to work. It's going to be midday in front of lots of people, but I'll try and be on my best behaviour. So there will be a live podcast at Bird Fair. Right, let's get into the ruff. So if you're a bird watcher, you're probably familiar with the word ruff because you know the bird, and that's spelled R-U-F-F. I'm referring to the fish, specifically the Eurasian ruff, because there are actually 5 species of ruff found all across Europe. Last year I went to Vienna and they had a stuffed striped ruff, which is a bigger species, beautiful looking fish. So to describe the ruff, I guess it's unfair to call them kind of brown and drab, but they are a mottled brown coloration. They have got a relatively small mouth, considering that they're in the perch family, so they're related to perch and zander. They've got a stunning large purple eye. The eyes are really, really beautiful mauve colour. And they've got a large eye, and this is because they're primarily found either in very deep, dark water or in murky water, often coming out at night. You will find them in the day, but typically in clearer water they hide away. So if you wanted to find a ruff, I knew my dogs would chime in at some point, then murky or deep water is typically where you will find ruff. In terms of like their favoured habitat, I always think of ruff really as being a river fish. Typically, a slow-moving river is very ideal for ruff. So things like the Thames, the Trent, they are in the Severn. They wouldn't be native because ruff are only native to eastern flowing rivers. They have, however, been distributed all over the British Isles. So you'll find ruff from Cornwall all the way up to the Lake District and pretty much everywhere in between. But originally, they would have only been found in eastern flowing rivers. They're also found in lakes, and in fact they do very well in lakes. I've filmed ruff in places like Farmore Reservoir in Oxfordshire, and it's absolutely black with them on the lake bed. If you go on YouTube, you can see some of the stuff I'm talking about. There's some videos that I've done, and there's thousands and thousands of ruff. So they can, in the right conditions, proliferate to massive, massive numbers. Interestingly, they're often quite a cryptic fish. So even though they've got quite a wide distribution, they can be tricky to track down. So if you're an angler, if you just want to see one, they're sort of everywhere and nowhere. Like, I know they're in the Trent, but in 30 odd years, I've never seen one in there, I've never caught one in there. I've had the odd person tell me that they catch them. And I think this is a mixture of, one, people aren't really using the gear to catch them anymore. You've got to use quite small hooks and small baits. But also, they probably have declined a little bit. And my theory behind that is that a lot of our rivers, for at least a time, were getting clearer. And that clear water meant that they were more susceptible to predation because they're a fairly slow-moving fish. And if you're a goosander, a cormorant, a grebe, a pike, a perch, whatever, then that little brown fish is quite a tasty, easy snack to devour. They've got a few little common names. So obviously the ruff is the main one. The main reason for them being called that is if you run your finger down a ruff, much like if you do the same with a perch or a zander, they feel rough. So I'm guessing that's where the name comes from. Whereas the bird, the ruff, that comes from the kind of feathers around the neck looking like kind of Tudor ruff. So it's nothing to do with that. It's that the literal feel of the ruff feels rough. They're also called a pope. I tried to find out why they're called a pope, and I kind of came up blank. So if anyone knows why a ruff is also called a pope, I'd be really, really interested to know that. They're also called a Tommy or a Tommy ruff and a daddy ruff. Again, the origin of those names escape me. I'd be really fascinated to know if people know why they're called those. But they seem to have a few little local names. I've always just known them as ruff, but yeah, you call them what you like. So, do people fish for them? Well, basically, the British record is 5 ounces, 4 grams. So even a big ruff is not a particularly big fish. You're talking something smaller than the size of your hand. Now, the world record, because I'm sure you're all fascinated in what that is a whopping 14 ounces. So they can actually get a lot bigger than they do in the UK, but typically they're a pretty small fish. So most anglers don't really target them. There is an increasing movement with species hunting gaining traction and people using micro lures, whether it's drop shotting or stuff like that. So ruff have become this kind of little unicorn of freshwater fish because, again, I wouldn't necessarily call them rare, but they can be hard to target. And people do travel quite a way to try and get them. So places like the Kennet and Avon Canal have become a kind of mecca for ruff anglers because there's a relatively good chance of catching one in there. But there are some other little hotspots around the UK as well. So it's amazing. It's a tiny little fish, but anglers do kind of travel to catch them. And I can see why. They are amazing looking things. When you're catching a dozen perch all over the place, and then you get that little ruff, they are a rather special little fish. In terms of diet, they're not especially fussy. They're generally predatory, so they're eating small invertebrates, small fish, and fish eggs. This comes into why they can potentially be invasive. So within its natural range, ruff are not a problem. They're not causing any issues. However, ruff have been translocated to a few places, and this is when they can be an issue. The two ones in particular where they're a problem are the Great Lakes in North America, believe it or not, and also the Scottish lochs. So I'll start with Scotland. Ruff were transported to Loch Lomond and I believe a couple other lochs. The prevailing theory is that they were introduced to these lochs via pike anglers. However, I'm a fisherman. I've been fishing for over 20 years. I've met a lot of fishermen in my time. I have never met a single pike angler who has used a ruff for bait. They would be a pretty shit bait. They're small, they're brown, they don't move much. So unless you were absolutely desperate, I don't see why pike anglers would move them. But there doesn't seem to be another credible theory. There are no ruff. The closest ruff to Loch Lomond would be in the Lake District. So I would guess I'm not sure if you can track the genetics of them, but if you did, I would be willing to bet they'd be the same ruff from the Lake District. But I have no idea why someone would intentionally move ruff to Loch Lomond. But however they got there, they're there. The problem with Loch Lomond is that there are some rare fish living in it. And in particular, you've got Arctic char and you've got the powan, which is a European whitefish, which coincidentally is going to be the subject of next week's podcast. So the thing with ruff is that they do eat fish eggs. And these small powan eggs and the individual young powan, they're not really used to being predated on. So the ruff are having an absolute field day because they're in a deep loch with not as many predators as they would normally have and lots of food. And they're actually causing a decline in the European whitefish, which is a fairly rare species. So we really don't want ruff in those areas. Like I say, in its natural range, they're not causing a problem. They're getting predated. There's natural predators and diseases keeping them in check. But it's not happening so much in Scotland. The fish that have made it all the way to North America in the Great Lakes, we think this is via ballast water. So ships have ingested water from Europe, and then when they've gone over the Atlantic, they've got to the Great Lakes, they've released that ballast water, and that's how we think ruff have gotten there. Same thing, they're eating native fish eggs and small native fish species, so they are causing an issue there as well. So when ruff are displaced, they can be a problem. Recently, I noticed that Southwest Water were highlighting ruff as invasive in the southwest. Now, this is technically true. There shouldn't be ruff in the southwest of England. There shouldn't be any coarse fish in the southwest of England. I don't really see the harm that they're doing there, because if you look at the reservoirs where ruff are found, so you find ruff in Crowdy Reservoir and in Colliford Reservoir, there aren't any rare native species breeding in there. So the ruff in the reservoirs are not going to be causing a problem to native fish stocks. The concern, I believe, is that those ruff are going to be pumped out of the reservoirs by accident into rivers where they could potentially impact salmon. Again, I'm not really buying it myself, because ruff like slow-moving deep water. Salmon like to spawn in fast-moving shallow water. So the two aren't meeting. So would I say that ruff are a big danger to salmon eggs? No, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm just saying that I don't think it's a big issue. But hey-ho, what do I know? So ruff have got a bit kind of a checkered past, in that in some areas they're invasive and they're hated, and in other areas they're a kind of beloved little cameo of a species when it turns up. Me personally, I love it. I mean, I've not caught many ruff. I can probably count with both hands how many ruff I've caught in my lifetime. I do absolutely love them, and I am planning to do a charity fishing match I think it's in July. If anyone's interested, get in touch. We do a species match every year for Prostate Cancer UK. There's only about 20 spaces or so, but if people want to join in on that, do kind of chuck me a message, because there's normally a couple of spaces on that if people fancy a little species match. And the main thing we go after is ruff. There's a lot of ruff in the venue that we fish. Have they declined? I mean, I mentioned it kind of briefly before. I don't think ruff have declined massively. I just think people aren't fishing for them anymore. I say they're a tiny fish. People don't really target them how they used to. But I think they're still around. There is, if you really want to get into ruff, there's a book that Mark Everard did. So many of you might know. I know Mark Everard. He's a good friend of mine, and he decided for some reason to do a book solely on ruff, which has got to be pretty niche, I should say, and it's called Ruffe, the Spiky Little Freshwater Ruffian. I think it's about 20 quid a book or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but if you Google it, you can grab a copy. If you want to learn more about ruff, I definitely recommend it. It's a great little book. Mark very kindly gave me a copy. It's a lovely book to kind of find out more about ruff. Next week is going to be about the European whitefish. So these are a glacial relic. They're amazing fish. They're found in a few places across the UK. And I've got a guest on to talk about that, who I'll reveal next week. And that's going to be the final episode of this season. I have got 1 or 2 bonus episodes planned in between the gaps. So don't worry, I will be releasing other episodes as we go along. and then it'll be the final season of the podcast after that. So that won't is it the fourth or the fifth season? I don't even know anymore. That's going to be coming out probably beginning of next year. So there will be a bit of a lengthy gap in between, but it will be back for the final season. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm rambling a little bit. I'm jet lagged. I'm probably still a little bit drunk from the stag do. Hopefully this was all legible and you found out a little bit about Ruffe. It's a relatively short episode, but to be honest with you, there's not a great deal more I can tell you about Ruffe. Get Mark's book. You'll find out a little bit more. This has been the Bearded Tits Podcast. I've been your host, Jack Perks, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Cheers. Oh, actually... Fucking hell, this is a mess, isn't it? I've got a book out. I should probably plug the book. So that's the whole reason I did this fucking podcast. It was a fish episode, right? How have I managed to do a career for 10 years? So I've plugged it a few times on the podcast. I've just released a book, A Field Guide to British Fish with Bloomsbury. God knows why Bloomsbury have decided to work with me. I'm very grateful. They're a fantastic publisher. But we've done a book. It's got 200 species of fish in it. You can go and buy it right now. Go to your local bookshop. Go to Waterstones. I would rather you not use Amazon, but I mean, it's up to you. If you want a signed copy, I am doing a limited number. The main reason is, even though I get an author's discount, it still costs me quite a lot to buy the book, so I'm not going to be buying loads. There is a link in the description for a signed copy. You can just buy the book anywhere if you want. I would also say, if you know that I'm going to be at an event, whether it's a screening or whatever, then bring a book along and I'll sign it. I'm more than happy to do that. But me personally, I'm not going to be selling that many. So if you want to get a signed copy, you can follow the link and do that, or just grab a copy wherever. I'm immensely proud of this book. It's got freshwater, marine species. It's got Ruffe in it. It's a great book. So yeah, without me selling myself too much, buy the book, please. I need to pay my mortgage off. Anyway, now it is actually the end of the podcast. I'll see you next week. Cheers.